Grace and truth comes from John 1:14, where it says Jesus was full of grace and truth. Join us today on this podcast as we dive into deep revelation and find ways to make it understandable, cowboy style, simple. That's the way I like it, and I hope you do too. Yes, thank you.
Let's talk about your love story. How'd y'all, I know how you met, but Gale, why don't you tell your side of the story, then he can kind of wrap it up, okay? And I'm going to tell you, life happens. How do you know life happens?
Yes.
In my life happens, and then some people abandon you and other people embrace you, and it's kind of a weird spot that you're in. You know, you can't please everybody, so you say, okay, God, I just want to please you.
Yeah,
so just listen to the whole story, okay? Don't judge them. Next time I preach, I'm going to talk about you're either going to be a condemning church or a condoning church.
Ooh.
Or maybe there's a place in the middle where we're really supposed to be. Anyway,
that's a good word.
Okay, anyway.
Amen.
Okay, so Gale, tell us your love story, how you guys met.
Yes, I want to know.
So
I've kind of heard it from your perspective.
Yeah.
I want to hear what you...
Me too.
So, just a little backstory, as I was saying before. So I grew up in church, but I didn't always walk that life. So I had a pretty up and down, all over the place kind of life. And at this point, my life was a disaster. I just went through a divorce and was in drugs and drinking and all this stuff. And I just realized at this point I needed to get a grip on my life. I just needed to get a grip. And friends of mine were going to this bar that was doing karaoke. And I was like, okay, you know, we'll just kind of calm down a little bit. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, but I need to work this out. And so I walked into this bar and I saw this guy and I was like, man, he looks so familiar. And I'm talking to this group of friends and I said, man, does that guy look familiar? Because I'm trying to figure out, how do I know this guy? Where do I know him from? And because I'd never been to this bar before. And so they're like, no, I've never seen him before. And I was like, man, I'm just racking my brain. How do I know this guy? And at that point, I'm watching him and he says, hey, do you guys want to do karaoke? And just as when he opened his mouth and spoke, I knew where I knew him from. And I was like, no, I don't want to do karaoke because I don't sing. But also I'm like, but I know you. And he
what
was
are you
like,
doing here?
He was like a deer in headlights. He was like, you don't know me, I'm from Texas. And he turns around and walks away. And I was like, well, that's rude. Who says that? When somebody says they know you, usually you're like, oh, really? Well, how do you know me? Kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
No, not him. So he walks away. And so I follow him. I'm like, I called him out. I was just like, that's so rude. Why would you say that to somebody, you know? I was, different.
Now look at, okay, you guys stand up.
Yeah.
Just stand up for a second.
Yeah.
Can you imagine this little girl walking up to him? You rude guy, what are you... Okay, you guys...
And I was.
Run over to me and I'm like who is this little girl?
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, get this visual picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew she was bad right at the end.
So I walked up to him and he was just like, you don't know me. And he was like terrified.
Yeah.
I was like, but I do know you. And the more I'm talking to him, the more I'm really realizing where I know him from. And so what it was the church that I was going to at the time had brought him in to do a fall festival. And they had like this we did it outdoors and you could dress your kids could dress up and they had a big slide and then he was there singing. And at that time I had never listened to country music, so I didn't really listen to him. I just remember him being there and it was just like such a vivid memory. Yeah. I had zero contact with him at all, just remember him being there.
Yeah.
And so so I said to him, I remember you being at Cornerstone. And so he was like, oh yeah, And so there was no condemnation because obviously we're both in the bar at the same time doing the same exact thing. And so, but he was just nervous because he never wanted to be found in that position.
I was hiding in a bar.
And I didn't care.
My biggest fear was to be noticed.
Yeah. Right. And I was trying to come out of it. I had already been living 3 years of just a crazy life. And so I wasn't thinking that. So anyway, so we started talking, and it's actually funny because, we're saying we need to talk and, get to know each other, whatever. And And he writes his phone number down on a piece of paper and he hands it to me. Folds it in half and he hands it to me. And so I put it in my pocket. And then like 30 minutes later or something like that, he looks down and he picks
My
up
number's
his
on the
phone
ground.
number off the floor. And he says, wait a minute, why is my number on the floor? And I pulled out that piece of paper they handed me. I was like, well, you gave me the wrong number because this is a blank piece of paper that you gave me. So he thought I was blowing him off and throwing the paper on the floor.
Yeah.
But so anyway, it's a long story to get to the point where then we just started like talking, and I told him I wasn't going to date because that's like no one likes to be put on an interview for hours at a time. That's just wasn't my style. So
Well, and what she said was, I'm trying to get my life right, and I want to go back to church. And
that was later
but
on
I'm
down the
just-
road, yes. But so eventually that was where we were turning, was getting back, going back to church. And
I didn't want to go to church. With
So
all of my heart.
when did you decide, okay, I could see myself spending the rest of my life with him? Because he's wild. He's a wild child.
well, it
It
was
took a lot of years.
Well, I mean, I think it was just because I knew his foundation.
Okay.
And I knew my foundation, and I knew eventually that was our ultimate goal, was to get back there.
Okay, good.
And how long it was going to take, I didn't really know for sure. But I kind of knew at some point I was kind of in it for the long haul. Now, there was times where I was ready to give up and just be like, okay, this is too long of a long haul. Like, we need to get it together.
Yeah.
But
Can I tell him one time how you did that? She had told me there's a certain addiction that I had that I was fighting through and overcoming, and she finally told me, if you do that again, I'm going to throw all your stuff out.
Yeah.
And I did again, and I came home from work, and it was raining, and everything I owned was out in the front yard.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm picking it up. I'm walking around picking up my stuff, and I started laughing. I'm like, this chick is for real right here. Like, she ain't no joke. Like, I need to get my life straight. That's literally what I was thinking. Like, she ain't gonna play. Like, if I'm gonna lose her, and I'm gonna lose. And at that point, I saw her as my only conduit back to God.
Wow.
And I know that's not correct, but that's how I saw it.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Let's jump ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Where do you call home now?
Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah.
We live full time at our bus. We sold everything we owned. We sold our
Okay.
home, everything we own, and we live in our bus full time. But our granddaughter and our soon to be grandson is in Michigan, so that's where we call home.
Okay, so how many days a year do you actually travel then? You're on the road.
I don't know.
Probably over 200. Probably closer to 250. Yeah. I mean, last year was different because we took a whole year off and just focused on Gale's ministry last year. So
and we're going to get there in just a second.
Yeah.
But
that's about right, because we go home.
So that's how many concerts, man? That's a lot of singing.
A lot, yes. But I don't ever want to. There's as you alluded to, I am getting older, and it does get harder.
Yeah.
You know, and like I can tell my throat right now is a little bit sore.
Well, and I remember Vern Jackson talking about that
Yeah.
whenever he was touring a lot, and he came to Wickenburg a number of years ago, and I remember him talking about that, how he had to start guarding what he said yes to, and even how he sang. With me, I always laugh because if I take a Sunday off preaching, usually even if I take 2 off, when I go back in the pulpit, I'm usually hoarse. But if I'm using it every day, it seems like it's a little bit more therapeutic. But anyway, what's the most challenging part of being on the road?
Being away from family.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when the grandkids come along.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness for technology, because they do
FaceTime.
Our daughter-in-law is so wonderful, because she'll do FaceTime and send us little videos, and Gale will, I'm not exaggerating, there's this one video where she's counting, doing her letters. No,
she's counting.
She's counting. And Gale has watched it 77 times. I mean, just over and over and over again.
It's so cute.
Yeah, she just gets a giggle out of it. So
You
that
love
helps
it.
us a
Love
lot.
it.
But that is hard.